We often imagine poverty as a matter of empty pockets, but in truth, it begins long before the wallet runs dry. It begins in the mind, in the heart, and in the habits that quietly shape the course of a life. A man may inherit riches and still waste them in folly. Another may start with nothing, yet rise by discipline and wisdom. Poverty is often thought of as a mere emptiness of the purse, but it is far more insidious than that. It is a condition of the soul that grows quietly in the absence of discipline. For money is like water in the hand without a vessel to hold it, without rules to guide its flow. It leaks away until nothing remains. A man may stumble upon wealth, but if he has not trained his habits, that wealth will slip through his fingers as surely as sand runs through an open palm. Discipline is the vessel, and without it, even abundance will vanish. Discipline is the unseen strength that orders life. It governs time, tames appetite, and teaches patience. Yet it is the very thing most despised by those who remain poor, for it demands sacrifice. It whispers, "Rise when it is easier to sleep. Save when it is sweeter to spend. Endure when quitting feels more pleasant." Without discipline, life becomes a chain of impulses, each one pulling a man lower. The poor man, without discipline, does not simply lack money. He lacks the very structure that could one day build it. Consider how small choices compound into destiny. The absence of discipline in spending leads to debt. The absence of discipline in work leads to wasted years. The absence of discipline in thought leads to confusion and drift. Poverty, then, is not first a matter of numbers, but of order. A man who has no order within will never create abundance without. For riches cannot be held by hands that refuse to be trained. They slip away, as surely as blessings wasted on a heart unprepared to keep them. There are many who pray for more money, but refuse to master the money they already hold. They beg for greater opportunities, but squander the little ones entrusted to them. This is not poverty imposed by the world, it is poverty chosen by neglect. Without discipline, wealth is wasted, doors are missed, and time, most precious of all, is lost forever. The tragedy is not simply that a man has little, but that he has little because he would not govern himself. Discipline, however, transforms. It builds slowly, often without applause. It demands the small act of saying no to the unnecessary, of choosing the harder road when the easier beckons. It teaches that the freedom we crave is never found in indulgence, but in self-control. For the man who governs his habits rules his future. He may begin with nothing, but with discipline, nothing remains impossible. Poverty flees not before the man who simply wishes for wealth, but before the one who trains his life as a soldier trains for war, prepared, steady, and unwilling to be mastered by weakness. Thus, to remain poor is not merely to have empty hands, but to have a disordered life. The cure is not merely more money, but more mastery. Poverty is not only a lack of money, but a lack of discipline, and once discipline is embraced, even the poorest of men hold the keys to abundance. Excuses are the currency of the poor, and like counterfeit coins, they purchase nothing of real value. They sound convincing, they feel comforting in the moment, but they buy no progress, no growth, no transformation. A man who masters the art of excuses may defend himself eloquently, yet he will remain exactly where he is. For excuses are walls dressed as words. They are the great enemy of responsibility, the quiet thief of time, and the hidden reason many remain in poverty long after opportunity has knocked on their door. The poor man often believes his condition is secured by the cruelty of fate, the greed of others, or the lack of chances. While these things may sometimes play their part, the deeper truth is that poverty endures when excuses are loved more than effort. An excuse is easier than labor, simpler than sacrifice, softer than endurance, but each one builds a prison, brick by brick, until a man is shut in by his own justifications. He thinks he is defending himself, but in reality he is binding himself. Excuses are poisonous because they remove the weight of responsibility from one's shoulders and place it upon something external. I cannot succeed because the world is unfair. I cannot rise because no one helps me. I cannot change because circumstances are hard. Yet history is filled with men and women who rose from hardship, who fought their way from nothing, who had every reason to excuse their failure, but chose instead to labor towards success. What separates them is not luck alone, but the refusal to speak the language of excuses. The tragedy is that excuses often feel noble. They make a man appear thoughtful, even wise. They sound like explanations, but they are only defenses against the discomfort of action. To excuse oneself from trying is to guarantee failure without ever facing the battle. A man who constantly blames the weather will never plant. A man who waits for perfect conditions will never sow. A man who explains his weakness rather than resisting it will never grow strong. Excuses are persuasive, but they are also barren. To break free from poverty, excuses must be silenced. Responsibility must be embraced as both a burden and a gift, for when a man says, "It is my fault, and therefore it can be changed," he discovers power. But when he says, "It is not my fault, and therefore I cannot change," he abandons the power he might have had. Excuses are the language of defeat. Responsibility is the language of victory. The poor man spends his excuses as though they were wealth, scattering them freely to explain every failure. But when the day is done, he has nothing in his hands. True wealth begins when excuses are cast aside and effort takes their place. For excuses are the currency of the poor, but action is the currency of the free. The refusal to learn is the refusal to grow. For growth is never an accident, but the result of humility and willingness. A man who closes his mind to new knowledge condemns himself to live the same year over and over, mistaking repetition for progress. Life is a teacher, and it is always speaking, but the unwilling student deafens himself and calls it wisdom. Poverty, stagnation, and mediocrity often do not spring from a lack of opportunity, but from a stubborn refusal to be taught. For the soil that resists the rain cannot yield a harvest, no matter how generous the sky may be. Learning is not reserved for the classroom nor confined to the years of youth. It is a posture of the heart, a recognition that one never arrives but is always becoming. Yet pride whispers to many, "You already know enough." And fear insists, "What if you fail in learning something new?" So they remain where they are, bound by the false comfort of ignorance. A man who will not read, who will not listen, who will not receive correction, is no better than one who cannot. Both remain impoverished not merely in wealth, but in mind and spirit. Growth requires the humility to admit that yesterday's understanding is not sufficient for tomorrow's challenges. The world changes, circumstances shift, and wisdom demands that we adapt. But the one who refuses to learn clings to old patterns as though they were lifeboats, not realizing they are anchors dragging him under. He may complain of his lack of progress, yet he ignores the very instruction that could lift him higher. In this way, he chooses his own chains. To learn is to risk discomfort, for it exposes our weakness and reminds us of what we do not yet know. This is why so many resist it. They prefer the safety of pretending rather than the humility of growing. But what they gain in comfort, they lose in destiny. A man who refuses to learn is like a tree that refuses water. He may stand for a while, but his roots will wither, his branches will dry, and his fruit will never come. On the other hand, the one who seeks learning, who welcomes correction, and who remains curious, cannot remain poor in the truest sense. Even if his hands are empty, his mind and character are being enriched. And from that richness, opportunities flow. Knowledge sharpens discernment, discipline strengthens habits, and wisdom prepares a man to steward greater blessings. Growth is not given to the proud who believe they need nothing, but to the humble who know they have more to learn. Thus, poverty of the mind is far more dangerous than poverty of the pocket. Money lost may be regained, but years spent in stubborn ignorance can never be recovered. To refuse to learn is to refuse the very path to freedom. To embrace learning, however, is to embrace growth, and with growth, all doors eventually open. Comfort is the silent thief of greatness because it lulls a man into believing that ease is enough, that safety is success, and that rest without labor is the goal of life. It whispers softly, never demanding, never alarming, yet slowly draining the strength and fire from the soul. Greatness does not die by sudden disaster, but by quiet neglect, by the daily choice to settle where striving was required. Comfort builds no monuments, leaves no legacy, and offers no honor. It only offers the pleasant illusion that one has arrived, when in truth one has stopped moving at all. Those who remain bound to poverty are often not destroyed by catastrophe, but by comfort. They cling to the little they have, unwilling to endure the stretching required for more. They trade the discomfort of growth for the ease of familiarity. To rise higher would mean failing at first, learning anew, facing uncertainty. And so they sit, convincing themselves that where they are is good enough, yet good enough is the graveyard of destiny. Comfort holds them with invisible chains, so soft that they barely feel them, yet so strong that few ever break free. The danger of comfort is that it appears harmless. Resting another hour seems small, spending another coin feels trivial, postponing another goal looks forgivable. But like drops of water wearing down stone, these choices accumulate until years are lost. Comfort makes a man passive, content with mediocrity, and blind to what might have been. The man who avoids the gym because his bed is warmer, the one who avoids risk because his routine feels safer, the one who avoids learning because ignorance feels easier. These are not destroyed by one decision, but by 1,000 quiet surrenders. Greatness, on the other hand, demands the opposite. It demands that a man steps out of what is easy into what is hard. It requires long nights, early mornings, and repeated sacrifices. It is uncomfortable by nature because it stretches beyond what is familiar. Those who achieve it are not necessarily the most gifted, but the most willing to endure what others would not. They face the pain of discipline, the sting of failure, the weight of responsibility, and while comfort robs the many, discomfort crowns the few. The irony is that those who chase comfort never find true rest. Their ease is temporary, their pleasures fleeting, their satisfaction shallow. But those who endure hardship for the sake of greatness eventually taste a deeper comfort, the peace of purpose, the joy of victory, and the rest that comes after honest labor. The bed of the lazy is never as soft as the sleep of the diligent. So we see that comfort is not a friend, but a thief. It steals silently, without violence, leaving nothing but wasted potential. Greatness is not lost in storms, but in softness. The man who would rise must learn to love discomfort, for in discomfort lies growth, and in growth lies greatness.